In a valley where the river bent like a question mark, there was a town that had almost given up on learning. The local school barely taught beyond primary level, and many adults carried the quiet shame of illiteracy, unable to read even simple signs at the market. Parents told their children not to dream of college, university, or any grand institute or academy in the distant cities. "People like us never get that far," they would say, their voices heavy with despair. For the brightest teenagers, the feeling was almost hopeless. Aiden, however, could not stop asking questions. When sunlight hit the water trough beside his house, he noticed how the beam bent, splitting into faint colors. He did not know the word refraction, but he felt there was a secret hidden in the bending light. While other kids helped to squash cabbages in barrels or repair carts after the occasional collision on the rocky road, he sat near the river with a broken mirror, trying to catch every fragment of color he could. The town believed practical skills mattered more than education. They respected strong arms and quick profits, not academic curiosity. Yet every night, Aiden lay awake, wondering what lay beyond primary and secondary school and whether there was a path from his dusty classroom to the world of laboratories, telescopes, and minds who studied light for a living. One autumn afternoon, a stranger arrived, a woman with calm eyes and a satchel full of notebooks. She introduced herself as Dr. Lara from the Invisible Light Institute, a research center that partnered with several universities and a small mountain college. The name sounded like a riddle, and the whole town treated her visit as a strange affair. Why would an institute with such an impressive reputation send anyone here? In the town hall, Dr. Lira explained the Institute's mission in clear, intelligible language so that even the least literate villagers could follow. Their work focused on ultraviolet rays, refraction, and other properties of light that were usually invisible, yet deeply influential. They were looking to recruit a handful of young people with the right aptitude, students who were curious, numerate, and capable of patient study. Some villagers muttered that it was a controversial idea. "Our children should work, not chase obscure theories," one farmer complained. Another worried it might be some sort of abusive scheme to steal their youth. But Dr. Lira did not abuse their trust. She ran simple tests, asking the teenagers to solve puzzles that combined numbers and patterns to describe what they noticed when light passed through colored glass and to talk about anything they wished to learn. Aiden's answers came tumbling out, a mixture of excitement and nervous wit. He described how he had watched the bending of sunlight for years, and how it seemed to change with the angle of the river's surface. Dr. Lira listened carefully, then smiled in a way that made his heart race. A month later, Aiden found himself on a train heading toward the mountains, accompanied by two other recruits from neighboring villages. Each of them felt like a novice, thrown into a world meant for an elite, all-round group of city students who had grown up surrounded by books and laboratories. The train climbed higher, where the air thinned and the sky turned a distinct, sharper blue. At the institute, they entered a lecture hall lined with diagrams of prisms, crystals, and complex instruments. An intelligent-looking professor welcomed them to their first academic term, promising that they would acquire not just knowledge, but also the expertise to handle powerful technologies. The program, he warned, would not be easy. They would study refraction, ultraviolet radiation, and even certain controlled radioactive materials, learning to understand risks instead of fearing them blindly. Lessons were demanding, but never meaningless. Instead of forcing students to cram facts, the teachers tried to instill a deep curiosity. They emphasized understanding over memorization, using experiments to enhance what was written in their textbooks. Aiden could finally put names to the phenomena he had seen near the river, and each new term he learned made the world around him feel more intelligible. When the workload felt overwhelming, the older students shared their own stories of struggle. One girl confessed that she had once felt like an idiot during her first year, lost amid equations and abstract diagrams. "But difficulty doesn't mean you're stupid," she said. "It just means your brain is still building new paths. Midway through the year, the Institute received a mysterious delivery, a small, dull stone sealed in a lead box. Rumor spread that it was slightly radioactive, a rare mineral capable of unusual interactions with ultraviolet light. The research project connected to it was controversial. Some academics argued that the risk was too high, especially with so many students on campus. Others felt the potential benefits provided the necessary impetus to continue. Dr. Alira believed in careful exploration. She invited a small group of advanced students to assist, and because of his careful observations in earlier experiments, Aiden was chosen as a junior helper. For days, they planned the experiment like a complex puzzle, predicting how beams of light might scatter, refract, or vanish when they struck the crystal. Every step was double-checked to enable maximum safety. Yet not everyone was satisfied. One visiting scholar, an arrogant man who liked to show off his intellectual muscles, mocked the safety protocols. "You are spoiling these students," he sneered. "Real genius comes from pushing limits, not hiding behind caution." His words stimulated heated debates in the dining hall, where students argued about ambition, ethics, and the thin line between courage and recklessness. Aiden listened more than he spoke. He knew he was still a novice, but he also sensed that the scholar's attitude carried a dangerous glamour. The experiment began on a night when the sky was perfectly clear. In a shielded laboratory, the team set up mirrors, lenses, and detectors. Thin beams of ultraviolet light were directed toward the crystal, their paths carefully measured. The room hummed with quiet expectation. At first, everything went as planned. They observed unusual patterns of refraction, distinct angles at which the beam seemed to split and form invisible corridors of energy. Some of the readings were difficult to interpret, but nothing looked dangerous. Then the visiting scholar, impatient with the slow pace, adjusted one of the mirrors without permission. The change was small but catastrophic. The redirected beam bounced off a metal surface, causing an unexpected collision of light and particles within the chamber. Sensors screamed. The air seemed to vibrate with invisible force. Several instruments broke, shards of glass and metal flying across the room. For a terrifying moment, everyone thought they were witnessing a cataclysmic failure that would squash years of work and maybe even shut down the institute altogether. Emergency systems activated automatically, encasing the crystal in protective shielding. When the lights stabilized and alarms died, the lab was a mess of smoke and fragments. Though nobody was badly hurt, the sense of shock was overwhelming. Students whispered about radioactive leaks and demanded to know whether the institute had risked their lives for a single experiment. In the days that followed, the campus mood darkened. Some students slipped into quiet despair, wondering whether their dreams of a scientific career had been spoiled. Parents sent angry letters about safety, and the media tried to turn the accident into a public scandal. Articles framed the whole affair as if the institute had been reckless from the start. Committees were formed to investigate the issue. The visiting scholar tried to hide his role, arguing in obscure technical language that the accident had been inevitable. He called critics cowards and idiots, accusing them of being unable to grasp higher intellectual risks. His verbal abuse did little to help morale. Aiden, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about the strange sensor readings he had seen in the seconds before the collision. Beneath the noise of the accident, there had been a pattern, subtle but discernible in the data. While others indulged in gossip or crammed for postponed exams, he spent his evenings poring over printouts, using his growing numerate skills to filter out the chaos. Slowly, a new picture emerged. The crystal had reacted in a way no one predicted, not just scattering light, but bending it into shapes that suggested controlled pathways of energy, like invisible threads weaving through space. When the Safety Review Board finally met, Aiden asked for permission to present his findings. At first, they hesitated. He was still young, with only one academic year completed, but Dr. Lira vouched for him, emphasizing his careful nature and the originality of his observations. Standing before the panel, Aiden explained in clear, intelligible sentences how he had reassembled the data fragments. He showed that the supposedly cataclysmic accident had actually revealed the crystal's most important property. The uncontrolled mirror adjustment had provided an accidental spur, redirecting the beam just enough to expose hidden pathways of light. If they redesigned the chamber with proper safeguards, they could stimulate the same effect intentionally and safely. The room fell silent. Even the visiting scholar could find no flaw in the logic. One professor, an all-round physicist with a reputation for calm judgment, nodded slowly. "What happened was dangerous," she said, "but it also gave us unexpected knowledge. The true question is whether we have the wisdom to use it responsibly." The board decided to continue the research under much stricter rules. The arrogant scholar was removed from the project, his earlier abuse of procedure formally recorded. Aidan, now more confident but still humble, was invited to join the core team, not as a token novice, but as a capable researcher in his own right. The events forced the Institute to rethink how it taught science. Instead of glorifying reckless genius, they began to emphasize collaboration, ethics, and clear communication. Workshops were created to help students discuss controversial topics calmly, turning emotional arguments into constructive, intelligible debates. Dr. Lira redesigned several courses to enhance not only technical skills, but also character. She wanted to instill in her students a respect for limits and for the communities affected by their discoveries. "Brilliance without conscience," she said, "is just another kind of illiteracy." Aidan noticed the changes in himself too. His early awe of elite scientists faded, replaced by a quieter admiration for those who combined wit with kindness and intellect with humility. He no longer tried to imitate dramatic geniuses from history books. Instead, he aimed to become the sort of researcher who could inspire others, motivate teams, and enable society to benefit from complex knowledge without being harmed by it. Years later, after the crystal research had led to new technologies, safer medical scanners, more efficient solar panels, and communication systems that used invisible corridors of light, Aidan returned to his hometown. The valley looked the same, but the people seemed older, worn by years without opportunity. He asked the mayor for an old warehouse and turned it into a learning center, a kind of informal academy where children and adults could study together. There were no entrance exams, no obsession with ranking, and no demand that students cram for distant tests. Instead, they built simple experiments with mirrors, glass, and lamps, exploring refraction and color. Illiterate adults learned to read instruction sheets. Anxious teenagers discovered they were far more numerate than they had believed. Aidan used stories from his own life to show that education was not just for an elite few. He told them how a boy who once stared at river light had helped transform a near disaster into a breakthrough, simply by paying attention and refusing to give up. "You do not need to be a so-called genius," he said. "You just need curiosity, patience, and the courage to keep asking questions." The little town by the river changed slowly but unmistakably. New schools appeared, from refreshed primary classrooms to a modest local college that partnered with the Institute. Children who once felt hopeless now saw many paths open before them. And on clear afternoons, if you stood on the hill and looked down, you could see the sun bouncing off hundreds of small mirrors in the schoolyard. Tiny experiments, glittering like a promise that the light of learning, once kindled, would never again be invisible.